really cool fact you just said that not many people do, but that you read Rich Dad Poor Dad in college and actually listened, and it made an effect on you in
Yeah.
college. It's funny, when I started investing, when I found Rich Dad Poor Dad 5 years, 6 years after my first real estate investment, and I
Okay.
told my brother about it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember reading that back in college." I was like, well, "Why
Nice.
didn't you do anything?"
That's great. Yeah,
So,
I definitely took action. I was like, I don't want to just keep reading because that book led to other books in real estate, and
yeah,
that was during a job that I had in college. And I'm like, it was a machine job, so I could just sit there and read. So, but then I said, how do I find a deal? Well, this was 2012. So, the recession had just come through, and we had, there was a bunch of deals on the market. So I found it through a realtor for my first deal. They were a dime a dozen back then, and, fixed it up. And it was a great deal, too. So this is the Deal Finder podcast. I literally went to a realtor that I knew in my church and said, can you find a fixer-upper? Can you find something for me? I don't want a fully renovated house. I want to find something that needs work. And she did, within a matter of probably a week or two, started sending me just a lot of off-market deals. And I finally found one that was near me, because for my first deal, I wanted to do one that was in my backyard almost. Like I could drive within 5 minutes of it to track on the progress of the property. So that's where I found one. It was in my city. It was 5 minutes from the house I was living in at that time. And I said, okay, let's take it down. So took it down, put about 25 or 30 grand into it, and then I rented it first. So I was able to check on it during that time that it was being updated. And then from there, it turned out great. And I'm like, this is awesome. So then I rented it for a little bit. Then it turned into the first house I lived in, and with my family.
wow,
So because this was, college time, and then I got married during that time as well too. So that was the first house we moved into. Then from there, that 2 years later, after we lived in it for 2 years, because we knew the tax law, and because if you live in a house 2 out of 5 years at your personal residence, when you sell it, there's no capital gains. So we moved out of it and then found another house at that point, I was with a company that we were doing like 25 deals a month, like wholesale, fix and flip, turnkeys. And I found a house through them and paid them and gave them a profit. Like I wanted to be fair to them, but they also found me a good deal that I was able to fix and flip. And, well, I say fix and flip. I fixed it up and then lived in that one, but then rented out the old house. So moved out of that one, but I didn't just rent it. I lease optioned the first property. So I got a lease, but then I also gave that tenant an option to purchase the property as well too and be the first in line. So it turns out this tenant was super tenant. So if you talk about Deal Finder, there's more than just the deal, the actual physical property. Because if you go into the rental space, another good deal you want is a good tenant. Because you don't want a body fill in the place. You want an actual person that's going to be responsible, a responsible, mature adult if you can find one. So I actually hired someone because of the connections I had at that point in real estate. I didn't want to vet the people. I didn't want to market. So I paid someone to market, I paid someone to vet people, and I paid the guy, like his normal typical fee. Like if he found someone, he took like the first month's rent, and then that was it. And I was like, okay, sure. Yeah. So then he took like the deposit from them, and then I was able to pay him, and then got the first month's rent as well. So I still walked away with, hey, I can still pay the first month's mortgage, and then also, then build up the deposit from there. Then that's where that tenant 6 months later, because this guy found him and he was an incredible tenant, the guy cashed me out on the lease option. So he actually went and got a loan and actually cashed me out. The thing that's funny about that was I was working with this company. We had about 80 lease options in our portfolio at that time, and like 2 had ever cashed us out. So like the statistics are very low for people cashing out because it takes a while to rebuild your credit, to go through that process, to go through the MLO. Like you have to actively work towards it. Well, that whole 6 months he had worked towards it. So that was another deal I found, but that was through someone else vetting it and knowing what to look for. And he found super tenant, and then 6 months later, I had tax-free, capital gains in my pocket to go out and do another deal. So then I, bought 2 more deals from there and bought 2 more rentals. So that was the first deal. But then my second deal was finding it from, the actual company I was working with, because then I knew the ins and outs, and I had the cheat codes. Like, I could look at the property in our CRM and say, where is it? How much did they purchase it for? Like, what would they be willing to sell it? Would I be willing to buy it, as an employee, and, to build my rental portfolio and give them the wholesale fee that they wanted. So it worked out there that I was able to do that, which I tell people all the time that ask me, because I go to a lot of events and speak on Profit First and stuff, and they say, where do I start? And I always tell them, if you have any skill whatsoever, if you can talk on the phone, or if you can put up signs, or if you could do something to add value to a real estate company, can you go work with them, at the beginning, maybe even for free, and tell them the trade-off is, I want to learn this area of real estate. If you find a mature business owner, they're going to say, you know what? Sure, I'd love to take you under my wing, and I also love to, utilize any skills you have right now, and then I'll teach you what's going on behind the scenes. So that's what I did with that first company. But then 8 months later, when I was, just out of college, the guy offered me a full-time job at that real estate company, and then for the next 5 years, I got to see 850 deals done between rentals, turnkeys, wholesale. So that was like a huge crash course, because I got to sit in so many seats and see all of those deals done, where I felt confident. I could do a subject to deal. I could do a wholesale. I knew what contractors to look for and not to look for. Like, I had so much knowledge from that in the real estate world that it was priceless. It was better than any book I had read. It was better than any conference I had attended.